Hi everyone, I'm Le from the class of Global Environmental Health at New York University. Today I'm going to talk about the Love Canal Tragedy in Niagara Falls, New York. The objective of this presentation is to discover the history of Love Canal and its environmental tragedy, examine the environmental contamination, analyze the public health effects, and review the governmental responses associated with the tragedy. Here's the table of contents. There will be 5 figures to help us examine the background, history, contamination, health effects, and governmental responses of Love Canal. First, let's start with the background of Love Canal. It is a neighborhood in Niagara Falls, New York, next to an aborted canal project with the same name between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, as shown in the map. It was originally created to be a model planned community, but abandoned due to financial difficulties. It then became a landfill for municipal and chemical waste, and unfortunately became one of the most infamous environmental disasters in American history. In Figure 1, it's a spatial map of the emergency declaration area at Love Canal, which we will discuss later. In the middle, the 99th Street is where the original canal project located. Now let's get deeper into the history of Love Canal. Here's a timeline. It was first planned and constructed by William T. Love, who wanted to use it to provide hydroelectric power. However, in 1900s, the project was abandoned due to financial difficulties and economic fluctuations. In 1920s, it was used as a municipal landfill by the city of Niagara Falls, and in 1940s, it was bought by the Hooker Chemical Company and used as industrial chemical dump site. In 1950s, it was covered with earth and sold to Niagara Falls School Board for only $1, because at that time, the Hooker Company already realized that the chemicals could be a problem one day. Then hundreds of homes and a public school were built on the site. In 1970s, the chemicals started to leach, which was triggered by the raised water table due to high precipitation, and then the explosion of contamination and health problems appeared. In 1978, President Jimmy Carter declared a federal emergency and relocated over 200 families, and in the 1980s, the second emergency declaration was made, and the remaining families were all evacuated. The EDA was established, and the Superfund Act was passed to clean up the site. It was until 2004 that the Love Canal was deleted from the EPA's national priority list of Superfund sites, and then some areas were reopened for residents. Until now, the site has been kept monitored and assessed every 5 years for long-term effects. So what were the environmental contaminations? When the chemicals started to leach, people on the site started to complain about the strange odor and the chemical residues appearing in their backyards. Also, they found some creeks or pits with contaminated black water. Most importantly, some children hanging out on the site got burnt by the chemicals leached. It was reported that over 80 chemicals were found at the Love Canal site. Here's a table of some chemicals found, and among them, many have been proven to be carcinogens. For example, the benzene, the tetrachloroethylene, the trichloroethylene, the dioxin, and PCB. So what are the health effects associated with the chemicals? The most prominent found were birth defects and miscarriages. There were also chloracne, which is a skin disease associated with dioxin exposure. There could be liver damage, chromosomal damage, cancers due to carcinogens, and asthma, as well as other respiratory system disease, or it might even lead to death. Here's a graph showing the number of miscarriages and children with low birth weight or congenital defects born in a specified area of the Love Canal from 1955 to 1977. As shown in 97th Street, which is outside of the most contaminated area, the problems were not obvious. In contrast, in 99th Street, which, as we see in Figure 1, is in the middle of the contaminated area. The cases of miscarriages were very frequent. Also, it's likely to see that people next to water area are more likely to develop such diseases or problems, probably due to the water contamination. So how did the government respond to the problems? First, the EPA and New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, they started investigating the contamination and built systems to collect, remove, and dispose contaminated water. They also protect the contaminated area to prevent further spread. Also, as we mentioned, President Jimmy Carter developed Love Canal Emergency Declaration Area and made 2 emergency declarations to provide federal funds for cleanup. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, they bought the affected properties, disbursed funds, relocated hundreds of affected families. And most importantly, the Superfund law was passed, and EPA officially placed the site on the Superfund program's first ever national priorities list in September 1983. Here is a line graph showing the funds spent on Love Canal cleanup over time, from 1978 to 2004. We can see that until 2004, about $400 million were spent on Love Canal cleanup over time. Also, there's a rise in money spent around 1995. It's because in 1995, the Hooker Chemical Company was sued and agreed to pay about $129 million to support the federal cleanup. To summarize, the Love Canal disaster was caused by the dumping of over 21,000 tons of toxic chemicals waste in an abandoned canal in Niagara Falls, New York. The hazardous chemicals, including many carcinogens, leached into the soil, air, and water, exposing the residents to severe health risks. The health effects included birth defects, miscarriages, cancers, respiratory illnesses, and even death among the residents. In 1978 and 1980, President Jimmy Carter declared federal health emergencies. Over 950 families were evacuated from the site. The Superfund law was enacted in 1980, establishing federal authority for hazardous waste cleanup. Now, Love Canal has become a symbol of environmental injustice, highlighting the need for corporate accountability and stronger environmental regulations. Here are all the references for the information and data appeared in the presentation. Thank you.